All right. Hello, everyone. Let's see if I can get some headphones in. What a mess. There we go. Oh, thanks for being here. It's the beginning of our 221001 Core 1A Plus study group. We will be starting up in about 6 minutes, right? Less than? A little bit there. Where's my night stand? There it is. There we go. 6 minutes to go. I guess I should get things going here. I've got all the wrong things around. This monitor's showing the wrong thing. That one's showing the... I got stuff to do. You know, I didn't do the podcast intro either. You may get all of that today. Hello, chat room. Hey, everybody. I know I'm late today. I got other things going on. That's why we had to push it a little bit today. Before I get things changed here, let me quickly do my podcast intro, or I will forget completely. I have a script. Today is January 12th. I guess I should get the date right. Now you get to hear. Normally you don't get to hear this part. Here we go. Let me clear out my throat a little bit. Oh, yeah, the Cylons are gone because I haven't started those up either. Would be good to actually record this since I'm doing a recording of the podcast intro. That would be nice, wouldn't it? There we go. See? Now everything's running. Let's do this. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer 221001 Core 1A Plus study group. This study group was recorded on January 12th, 2020. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer 221001 Core 1A Plus study group after show. This after show was recorded on January 12th, 2020. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. Okay, that's good. Turn this down. This goes here. Let's go back to the chat room. Did I say 2020? Gosh darn it. You know why I said 2020? Because it says 2020 right there. This study group was recorded on January 12th, 2021. This after show was recorded on January 12th, 2021. I love audio, man. You don't have to do the whole thing. You can take the clip of it. It's so great. That's what happens when you don't update your dates from last year. We're going to have to go through this whole thing. I only have to do this single line. So nice. I should do my entire course in audio. That'd be the worst video course ever, wouldn't it? All right, that looks good. Thank you, chat room. What would I do without you? What would I do without you? Let's get the chat room up. I need to pop you out. Pop it out. Pop it open. Pop open to MTV. There we go. And let's put this over here. That looks good. Oh, I mess up stuff all the time, brother. You're in the right place. If you're looking for somebody who gets things messed up a lot, that's what post-production is for. So glad to have that. Okay, let's get presentation is here. Oh, you know what? I didn't put the pop-up on my website is not there. So let's add that. There's so many things. I did a keynote presentation for the last hour. So it was a different thing I was involved in. So a lot of the things I usually do in that first hour, I just didn't do because I haven't been here. What is today? Today's the 12th, 2021. There it is. And my Core 1 A Plus study group is live right now. Let's save those changes. There we go. Love it. Loving it. Nice, nice, nice. Well, it is mostly automated, but there's some things you just have to do manually. Just have to get it going. Hey, everybody. So good to hear from you. Got a lot going on here. I know, on the December study group, it was January 5th, and then everything changed. So that's one of those situations, getting into those. So that makes it easy if you're ever in that situation, having to deal with those pieces. All right. What else have we got going on? A lot of details. A lot of things there. Oh, we've got this. I need to put up my stream status. That looks good. We're recording here. Oh, I didn't swap around the screens after all of that. And I have a minute to go. All right. On this monitor, we need this. Boom. And on the other monitor, I need the stream. There we go. That's where it's supposed to be. That works. Now it looks like they've changed the front end of my quiz front end. We're going to see how well this works out. It's kind of hard to see with this. I have to figure that piece out. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's go to our keynote. Let's get a green light. Let's play. That looks good. All right. Well, it is the top of the hour. I think it's time to get started. You know what I didn't do is put the graphic up. See, it's all these things. Let's put the graphic up. This is January study group. Let's move it over. Boom. There it is. And now we can start study group, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 2021 Core 1A Plus study group from ProfessorMesser.com. Welcome to the new year, everybody. This has been quite a day. We've been able to get online. We're starting a little bit later than we normally start, but that was in the schedule. That's why I always say make sure you check back with the calendar so you know exactly what's going on. We're so glad you're here to join us. I have in this first hour Q&A that comes directly from the Core 1A Plus study group materials. We'll go to the exam objectives and look through all of those. And then in the next hour, I'll open up the phone lines, take questions from the chat room. So we got a lot of things we can work on today. We'll start with the Q&A that I've got for you. This is something that you, if you are here live, can participate with us by visiting our website, ProfessorMesser.com/QA, where you can be able to answer as we go through this. Now, if you're not on live, if this is a replay, you're not able to do that, but that's okay. Pop open a new browser window if you're here live and go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. There's also an app you can get. This is the Socrative student app, and you can get that from your favorite app store. That particular app allows you to also answer the questions. Once you're on that page, just stay on that page. The questions will change as you are sitting there. If you have the app, it will ask you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer, all one word, ProfessorMesser. That will get you to the question. And if you have done that, there will be a question there. And the question will be one that comes from last month. We call it our rewind question to see if you're able to get in and answer these questions online. The question asks, a monitor continues to display an image on the screen after the computer is turned off. Which of the following would describe this issue? Would it be artifacts, dead pixels, an incorrect video driver, hardware acceleration, or burn in? Now, if you know the answer, do not answer in the chat room. You want to go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer there. If you think you know what it is, answer that question, and we will come back to that question in just a moment. Thanks for being here. We've got so much to go through. I know I'm sort of in the middle of trying to make sure that all of this is going to work properly for you today. We have finally got things started a little bit late, but we're so glad you're able to join us. Don't forget that you're also able to see what we're doing out on social media. I'm working on a ton of Security Plus videos right now. I think we put 40 of them out in the last few weeks, so you can go to subscribe to us on YouTube to see about those at ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. There's also things on Twitter, ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter, and on Instagram, ProfessorMesser.com/Instagram. Daily pop quizzes are always there. You'll find all of them to be able to pull from. Keep your ears open during this first hour of the study group. I will give you information on how you can earn continuing education unit credits. Now, if you don't know what those are, then it doesn't matter to you. But if you're already certified, this might be something you can use. So be sure to listen out for that. You can earn up to 4 CEUs in a 3-year period. I can give you one of those today. So that'd be something to listen for. Today we're going to talk about questions from the 220-1001 A+ exam. There's obviously 2 exams you need to take to earn your A+, the 1001 and the 1002. Sometimes we refer to these as the Core 1 and the Core 2. I don't know why, that's just what they call them. This is a set of exams that was released in January of 2019, so it's been around a couple of years. We've still got well over a year before you would ever see this go away. So if you're studying for these exams, these are the right ones. You should keep doing that. The exam requirements for the 220-1001 is you need a 675 on the scale from 100 to 900. So that is what you should be shooting for in your exam. Not sure why we're shooting for that exactly. We're never quite sure what your score is going to be. Just do the best you can and hope it turns out to be more than 675, I guess. If you're someone who's been studying for the previous version of this exam, you'll notice that we have about 21% of the topics brand new in the 220-1001. That's why I always tell you, make sure that you have a book or study materials that is specifically written for the 220-1001 and the 220-1002. Do not use old materials. Will put you at a significant disadvantage. Make sure you have a copy of the objectives. You can always download them directly from the CompTIA website. I put a link on my site that will get you there at professormesser.com/objectives. It might help you as you go through this. We're going to talk about topics that come directly from the 220-1001. That would be mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and hardware and network troubleshooting. So we've got a few things that we can talk about today in the questions we're going through. So keep your eyes open for questions from those topics. Of course, all of my videos are available for you to watch absolutely free online. You can stream them at any time. There's no cost to be able to do that. But of course, there is other things that you can add on to this. Maybe you'd like an offline version of these videos. Maybe you would like an offline version of an audio version of the course. Maybe you'd like some practice exams or course notes or my exam hacks ebook. All of these things are available on my website in my Success Bundle. It provides all of that, including some additional access to Q&A on this particular study group. You can learn all about this on my website. Go to professormesser.com/1001success. and learn all about my Success Bundle. I also have free questions on my website, absolutely free. They are my Take 10 Challenge questions. It's groupings of 10 questions apiece. They're archives from these study groups. So you'll find them on my website for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. Hundreds of questions are there. You'll find it at professormesser.com/take10. professormesser.com/take10 for all of those. Plenty to see along those lines. There are also a video replay of this available immediately afterwards on this study group. There's also a podcast audio version of this that you can have go right into your podcasting program. So if you're somebody who likes listening to podcasts and you would just like the audio to be there anytime you click on it, you can find that at professormesser.com/podcast. The podcast is their podcast links there available for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. So make sure you have a look at those. You'll notice that there are timestamps on the YouTube video descriptions, which is kind of nice. You can click on it and go right to that particular part of the page of the video. It's kind of nice to have that there. We have my marketing manager, Lori, who has to go through this entire replay and do all of these timestamps. She's a trooper. Hi, Lori. Lori's listening to the replay. Say hi, everybody. Hi, Lori. Thank you so much for doing these. It is one where you can go back for years and find the timestamp of exactly what you're looking for. So very useful to have that there. Make sure you take advantage of that. That's on the YouTube video description. Don't forget about my course notes. If you want a summary of everything that you're seeing today and everything from my course, I put them all together into one single set of course notes. There they are. I have both digital and physical versions. This is obviously the physical version of the course notes, full color, details of everything that's in my videos in one single piece. Very nice to have there. Make sure you have a look at those. Obviously, it's going to save you time because the entire A+ course, 137 videos, 18 hours long, 18 and a half. There's a lot there. If you don't have time to go through all that or time to just take all the notes, have a look at the course notes, professormesser.com/1001 notes. This is also a great way to support the site, keep everything going as well. And we appreciate everyone who has purchased these notes. It really does go a long way. Thank you very much. Let's go back to that question I asked originally. which was a monitor continues to display an image on the screen after the computer's turned off. Which of the following would describe this issue? Would it be artifacts, dead pixels, an incorrect video driver, hardware acceleration, or burn-in? Well, if we look at the results, we can see that 81% of you say it's burn-in, 10% of you say it's dead pixels. We have 7% that said artifacts, only 1% said an incorrect video driver, and only 1% said hardware acceleration. 81% is a pretty big number. This is one where knowing how to understand troubleshooting on these is pretty important. Burn-in is a problem on all monitor types, probably more so on the older monitors, but you still see it on LCD monitors as well. A lot of monitors these days will pixel shift, where they will move over or up or down 1 pixel. If nothing is happening on the screen, you'll not even see it. It's barely a change, but it's enough to keep some of the pixels always constantly moving so that you don't have burn-in. LCDs, it's more of an image sticking more than anything, and sometimes you can put a white screen up and that might help get rid of the image that is stuck on the LCD. It is not always permanent on an LCD, not like it used to be on the older CRT displays. Here's a good example of a CRT with the burn-in. You can see the listing of what was on time at this particular airport, like it was in a different place. The remarks was a much bigger typeface there at the top. You can see what used to be there. That's a problem, isn't it? Not what you want to find in. So it's something you'll find on many different monitors, but not something that you can often see these days. We've tried to avoid that type of situation. So that means if you answered burn-in, that was the right answer. 82% of you did get that one absolutely right. It would not be artifacts. Artifacts is information, kind of a corruption of information you're seeing on the screen. You often get artifacts with a bad cable, for example, or bad interface. Dead pixels are pixels that are just black. There's just nothing there. So displaying an image on the screen after it's turned off wouldn't be black, unless if your image was black and then you turned off your computer, it was still black. Would that be burn-in? It would not. That's not the way it works. It would not be dead pixels. And incorrect video driver, 1%. The video driver has nothing to do with what's displayed on the screen after the computer's turned off. And hardware acceleration, a similar situation. It's a configuration setting, so not there either. This is when you would really find this situation almost always associated with burn-in, and that is the right answer. If you answered E, burn-in, that is the right answer. So very good. It's useful to have that there. So now we are in here. We are able to answer these questions. You can see the questions going through. One of the things we like to do is our first new question of the month is I like to do a performance-based question. For those of you that have not taken this exam before, the first set of questions you get at the beginning of the exam are not multiple choice questions. Now, this one was a multiple choice. You have a question and there's multiple choices to choose from. In this question, you had a 20% chance to get it right, even if you guessed. So there are questions you get at the beginning of your exam that are not multiple choice. They're anything but multiple choice. They are called performance-based questions. These might be drag and drop questions. These might be questions where you have to configure something or set configuration settings in a screen. It may be a matching question. It may be a drag and drop question. There may be all kinds of questions associated with that. So this is one where I create a brand new performance-based question every month. So here is our first new question of the year, our first new performance-based question of the year, and it asks, order these technologies from lowest throughput to highest. See if I can change it on your screen. There we go. Order these technologies from lowest throughput to highest. And the technologies are SATA Revision 3.0, satellite networking, USB 3.0, one stream of 802.11ac, and 1000 base T. So we're going to use all 5 of those. They're scrambled up, though, right now. You need to put them in order from lowest throughput to highest throughput. Yes, if you don't know what throughput means, this is going to be a very difficult question for you. From lowest throughput to highest, which is not always what I ask. So make sure that you get these right. Now, if you think you know the answer, you want to go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Be sure you put that in there. ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Lock it in for all of those. This might help you for all of this. This is a difficult question, but these are the types of questions you might get at the beginning of the exam. So you have to be prepared for these. And this is one that I think a lot of people struggle with because knowing the speeds of these is not always the easiest thing. So you might know some of them, so start moving them around at least. Maybe you know that at least one thing is faster or slower than another. To have this, none of the above is not one of the available answers, though. Maybe I should have put that in. I don't want to answer this is not one of those answers. So see if you can scramble it up to get it here. Now, one of these that always is a challenge, of course, is you could put these in an order where some of them are right and some of them are wrong. CompTIA does not necessarily provide multiple choice. What they've said on their website is that sometimes they do give you partial credit on questions like this that could be multiple right and wrong answers, that it could be partial credit, but they also say it could not be partial credit. So you've got choices here to be able to work through this. We just don't know. So I guess if you're taking this exam, just do the best you can. There's no way to know how they're scoring it. You don't even know if this is worth a lot of points or worth very few points. They don't tell you. So that's one of the challenges, is you just have to do the best you can, and ultimately we'll see if we get it right. So that's what we're going to do with this one too, is work through that and figure out the details. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, lock in your answer. Have I got people showing answers coming? Yes, I do. I can see people putting answers in, and all you have to do is put them in what if you think they're already in order, you put in A, B, C, D, E, and you're done. Lock it in. You have to remember what you lock in, though, to have this there. That would be the one that you work through, to have all of those pieces there. So we'll figure out the details. Let's see how you did with this one. The question was, order these technologies from lowest throughput to highest. The 5 technologies were SATA Revision 3.0, satellite networking, USB 3.0, one stream of 802.11ac, and 1000 base T. Let's start at the beginning. We want lowest throughput to highest. If we had to find in this entire list the one that would be lowest, this one might be relatively obvious considering all of the other choices that were there, but it would seem and make sense that satellite networking would probably be lowest on our list. And if we had to kind of describe the speeds that you would commonly see associated with consumer satellite networking these days, it'd be somewhere around 50 megabits per second, although there are certainly services that go faster than that. But I'm kind of giving you an idea of what you would commonly see with those pieces. So already people are saying, oh, wait, you mean lowest to highest? Yes, ordered them from lowest to highest. So if you did them in the reverse order, kind of reverse it in your mind, but remember that for the exam. Make sure you read those questions on the exam. They're going to want them in a very particular order. Make sure you put them in that right order. Second one on our list then, the next highest speed was not maybe what you would expect. It is D, one stream of 802.11ac, because a single stream of that particular wireless networking technology is 866.7 megabits per second. So this is, that's pretty fast. You jump from 50 megabits to 866 megabits per second. So already we're doing pretty good. Notice we're pretty close to a gig at that point. 866.7 is very close to 1,000, which means in the middle of this we have gigabit Ethernet, which I did not write as gigabit Ethernet because I thought that would give it away. So I wrote it as 1000 base T, which is absolutely the way you would probably see it written in most places. So that is third on our list. 1000 base T is 1000 megabits per second or 1 gigabit per second. That is what we would use for that. So already we've got these 3 in place: the satellite networking, a stream of 802.11ac, and 1000 base T. We've got 2 left on our list. The next one on our list, well, at this point, if you're 3 for 3, you got a 50-50, right? Next on our list, USB 3.0. USB 3.0 runs at 5 gigabits per second. Notice I said 3.0 for this one and not another standard. Make sure you get those standards right to be able to know what those are. If you got all 4 of those, then you got all 5 of these. The last one is SATA Revision 3.0, which operates at 6, just over USB speeds at 6 gigabits per second. The newer USB speeds go faster than 5. So that's one of the reasons why plugging this in. Now, though, that's a difficult question, to be fair, but those two are pretty good. Knowing those speeds is pretty good thing to know. Those are very common technologies. Those are things that are definitely listed in your CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure that you know what these happen to be. In the chat room, are you allowed to write all of these out with pen and paper while this test is online? If it is online, you have an online place where you can type this in, an online notepad that you can use. They call it, it's not really paint, but they do have it so you can put in you can either draw it with a mouse, which would be silly. Why would you do that? You get a whiteboard. It's a digital whiteboard. You can click on it. And I have a link to a digital whiteboard that is on my site. I should tweet that out or at least put it in the exam objectives. Lori, who is watching this, make sure you ask me about that link, and we will put it in the exam objectives. This will hopefully not be one of those where we'll put it in the exam or in the video description, and I don't put in the video description. We'll definitely put it in there because I told Lori to tell me. So if you don't see it there, tell me that it's not there. But I'll put a link to an online practice for the digital whiteboard so you can play around with it before you go into the actual exam, which is kind of nice. So you can play around with typing it in. It's just a digital view where you can type it in from your keyboard and see it all there. So that's useful to have. So if you answered these right, you were doing pretty good. Satellite networking, 50 megabits per second. One stream of 802.11ac is 866.7 megabits per second. 1000 base T is 1000 megabits per second, or a gig per second. USB 3.0 is 5 gigabits per second, and SATA Revision 3.0, 6 gigabits per second. Can I recommend a practice exam that's like the actual exam? Yes, I can. You can see Professor Messer's 1001 Core 1 A+ practice exam on my website. I've designed it to be almost exactly like an actual exam. In fact, here it is. This is it. That's the one I'm talking about. That's the Core 2, but it's the same thing, same book. Not the same book, but looks like the same book. We'll even go through that if you'd like to go through that later on. We'll look at those pieces. Let's do another question, though. That was your performance-based question of the month. Hopefully you've got an idea of sort of the style of some of the questions that you might get. Some are easier, some are harder, but that is certainly a style of question that is one that you might expect to see on the exam. Let's do another one. I've got a question for you. This next one is a multiple choice question, thankfully. And it asks, each time a computer starts, it shows a date and time error. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be a certificate error? Would it be an incorrect time zone setting? Would it be Bluetooth not connected? Would it be a bad motherboard battery? Or would it be the network is disconnected? Which one of those would it be? These are, as we go through these, hopefully that would be very similar to some of the things you would see. Now, if you think you know the answer to this, instead of answering in the chat room, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock it in. Now we'll have to start really adjusting things. This is where whenever you start working through these problems, these become a bit of a challenge for time. So make sure that you are always going through the process of understanding how much time I have left in this exam, reading through it and making it work. These will be extremely important as you get further into this. So be very familiar with where you are. There is a clock that is on the screen. So you will know up in the corner just how much time you have left to be able to do that. So make sure you go through all of those and figuring out the details. It's one where you really have to know exactly how much time is left. These go by quick. You could get as many as 90 questions on the exam, and you have 90 minutes. So this is one that goes really, really quick to figure out those details. See if you can figure out this one too. Each time a computer starts, it shows a date and time error, which the following would be the most likely reason for this issue. If you think you know the answer, put the answer at professormesser.com/QA, and you can lock in your answer there. The possible answers were certificate error, incorrect time zone setting, Bluetooth not connected, a bad motherboard battery, or network disconnected. It's all there. You can figure out the details of this. That'd be a good one to go through. This is a problem you can actually run into pretty often. So hopefully this is when you'll be able to troubleshoot and work through all of those. can be very useful to work through those too. Let's see how you did with this one. We've got these 5 possible answers. Every time your computer starts, it shows a date and time error. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Certificate error, incorrect time zone setting, Bluetooth not connected, bad motherboard battery, or network disconnected. 80% of you said a bad motherboard battery. And it's not just a date and time error. It's like it doesn't even know what the date and time is when you work through these. It becomes a little bit of an issue to have this. This is an error that you would see when you start up the computer. So it's during the boot process as it is going through post. This is the power on self test. That is what you would find during this process. There is a little battery on the motherboard that maintains the date and the time. That's because if you unplug your computer and take your computer somewhere else, it doesn't have a power source. So how is it supposed to remember what the date and time is? So that is where those come from. That's where that BIOS battery is really useful, is able to have that and keep track of the date and time when there's no power to the computer. Now, if you're always plugged into power, you're probably not going to run into this problem. But it's when you unplug, eventually you're going to have to unplug, right? So that's where you would see this problem. You start your computer up the next time and suddenly says, I don't know what the date and time is. You're going to have to put in the date and time for me, please. So that is very useful to have that there. So very, very common. I like the boots. Some people in the chat room do not like my boots. Just so you know, I love these boots. They aren't my boots, but I think they're fine. I think they're comfy. Get a set of Uggs. That's what you need. The Uggs will be helpful when you're trying to replace the battery in the motherboard. So that is what you would need to know. Now, why wouldn't it be some of these others? An incorrect time zone setting. I've also heard people say that NTP is the issue. Well, not when you're booting up. It's not, you haven't had time to even do an NTP, network time protocol, for all of those. So an incorrect time zone setting isn't going to help you either. If you're getting an error when you start up, before it even starts the operating system, each time the computer starts, a date and time error it's not an incorrect time zone setting. It's almost always going to be that battery associated with this. Not a certificate error. Certificates are used for encryption. Usually website encryption is a good example for certificate. We use certificates for the hard drive encryption. But the message we were getting is a date and time error, and that is not the issue we would see here. Bluetooth has nothing to do with the date and time, so it's definitely not Bluetooth not connected. And a network disconnected would certainly show us a problem with the network, but it would not show us a problem with the date and time. That would not be the primary issue with date and time. If we're seeing a date and time when we first start this up, we're definitely having a problem with this. There's so much associated with date and time in a computer, by the way. If the date and time is not correct, that means that a lot of other things are not going to work either. So a good point in this is the date and time needs to be as close as possible to what the actual date and time is. Because if you boot up and your computer is on the wrong day and the wrong time, you will notice things like Kerberos, which is you logging into the Microsoft Active Directory network. Kerberos is expecting you to be at least 5 minutes close to what the Active Directory server is set to. So if you run into that, that will be your problem, is that suddenly you aren't able to log in. Kerberos, nothing is working with your encryption. You might even get errors when you go to other websites, all because your time and date is not correct. That is quite a problem. So that's why we have the batteries to keep track of time and date. That's why if you finally do get booted up, NTP will adjust the date and time. That's your network time protocol. Should be turned on and automatic in your operating system. It's part of the clock settings if you're in Windows. So you can set it up so that it automatically synchronizes the time with a centralized server, so that it's always going to have the latest date and time on there to be able to break those out. That is so many things can cause this problem, but of all the answers you have here, the only one that makes any sense is D, the bad motherboard battery. That is the right answer. So hopefully you were able to break that one down as well. Let's do another question. Let's see what the next one has for us. The question asks, a smartphone has been configured to retrieve email messages over TCP 110. Which of the following would most likely be using this configuration? Is it SMTP, POP3, Outlook.com, SMIME, or IMAP4. Smartphone has been configured to retrieve email messages over TCP 110. Which of the following would most likely be using this configuration? Is it SMTP, POP3, Outlook.com, SMIME, and IMAP4? If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer there. That's the best place to go to figure out those details. See if you know what the answer is. And of course, you'll see that answer, the question and the answers on your screen there if you're here live, and being able to do that. Yes, no Googling. No Googling that. That is not what you want to do. That is, you want to figure it out to be able to have those there. Maybe it's one of those situations where you're going to pretend you're there in front of the exam. There's no resources available. Now you have to figure it out. And you don't get a Google in the exam, to your points, to have that there. One of the things that you'll often find, by the way, people don't realize, they think, oh, I can take the exam at home now. I can take the exam online. So therefore, I can Google things. No, they're watching you the entire time. So that won't work either. Yes, we do have a Q&A at the end of this live stream, at the end of the hour, where I do take your questions from the chat room, and I will absolutely take your phone calls. We'll set that up and figure out how to make it all work here in the new year. It would be nice. I know they used to say that about calculators. You don't get a calculator either. You don't get a calculator. You don't get a sheet of paper. Nothing happens now. Can't bring anything in. They watch you. They video the whole thing of you taking your exam. Can't put your hand in front of your face. Can't say the questions out loud. It's as if you were in an actual exam room, for example. So pretty useful to have that. Yeah, if you need a webcam to make that happen. They are watching you the whole time. They're recording the whole thing. Absolutely. It's not one of those situations. They are definitely trying to make it as strict and legitimate as going to an exam center. So that's the benefit of doing it at home. So you got to really set things up properly if you're doing it at home. Let's talk about this question, though, and see how you did. The question was, a smartphone has been configured to receive email messages over TCP 110. Which of the following would most likely be using this configuration? Would it be SMTP, POP3, Outlook.com, SMIME, IMAP4? The results tell us 71% say it's POP3. So if we're ever trying to get in the situation where that's a pretty good number, trying to maybe ask the audience here, that's a pretty strong number. But 13% double digits said SMTP is what we would be using for that. 9% said IMAP4, 4% said SMIME, and 3% said Outlook.com. Well, a few key things in this particular question. One of the keys was the smartphone has been configured to retrieve email messages over TCP 110. So retrieving email messages, we know that it's not going to be SMTP. SMTP is sending messages. We are receiving messages, and if we are receiving messages, then we're using something like POP3. POP3 is a message receiving protocol, and POP3 commonly uses TCP 110 to be able to retrieve this. Hopefully your internet service provider is using POP3S, which is POP3 over a secure channel, using encryption, using TCP 995 commonly. Although you will find that some providers, some ISPs, will just set them all to be encrypted these days and will not send anything in the clear, even over TCP 110. But we always think of 110 as the non-encrypted, as the in the clear piece of this as well. It could have been IMAP4, but IMAP4 uses a different port. So it would not be using TCP 110. So those two keys can kind of help us move down the road with this, that it's receiving, so it's not going to be SMTP. It's probably going to be either POP3 or IMAP4, and we know that POP3 is the one that uses TCP 110. That's the one that wins, to have that piece of that there. So hopefully that is one that will work through. If you saw TCP 143 there, you say, oh, 143, I know what that is. That's IMAP 4. So you'd be able to adjust your answer accordingly. In this case, TCP 110 was a pretty important clue. Now, we also have Outlook.com. Now, if we're using Outlook.com, we're usually communicating over a web browser. And if we're communicating over a web browser to this site, same thing for Google Mail, same thing for Yahoo Mail, then you're probably using TCP 443, which is HTTPS. Not really the same thing, though, is it? As receiving email messages on a smartphone. You would not be using Outlook.com to receive email messages on your phone. So not really the best answer there at all. And then SMIME, Secure MIME, is a way to encrypt the email message itself. Really not associated with a port. That's a functionality of the application you're using for email. So that is one where it becomes important to know these port numbers, both the secure and the unsecure versions of this. They are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure that you know everything listed in the objectives. There is not only port numbers individually listed, there are also some secure versions of these listed. Make sure you know all of them. They are in the CompTIA exam objectives. They're spelled out. You don't have to know any more than what's listed there. You certainly should know everything listed there. Don't know less than what's listed there, because they could ask you about anything in that list to make that happen. So make sure you go through that list and you're very familiar with those. Let's do another question. So here's one. Here's more of a practical question for those of you that would like some practicality in your life. Remember, we are answering this online at professormesser.com/QA. Please do not put answers into the chat room. This question asks, which of the following would be the best way to create a wire map of an Ethernet cable? Which of these would be the best way to create a wire map of an Ethernet cable? Is it multimeter, loopback plug, punch-down tool, Wi-Fi analyzer, or crimper? Which of the following would be the best way to create a wire map of an Ethernet cable? Would it be a multimeter, loopback plug, punch-down tool, Wi-Fi analyzer, or crimper? Those are your 5 options. See if you know the best way to create a wire map of an Ethernet cable. Well, that does pose a problem in the chat room. If you're asking me what a wire map is, you already have a problem. We already have an issue. So you're going to have to take a guess. That's the beauty of multiple choice, I guess. If you don't know what they're talking about, you've got a 20% chance to be able to have this. You'll know what a wire map is very quickly, though, because I'll explain it all to you when we are done here. You'll see. You'll have something you'll learn today you can take with you. You'll be ready for the exam by having all that detail there. You will find it's very useful to have a wire map on your system. So hopefully that's one that you can be familiar with, a wire map. So this is, yes, I'm telling you, there's a chance. There is a chance. It's 1 in a million, but there is a chance. You can, of course, do that. This is one, you will use this often. You'll have some functionality here. In fact, the answer that I think many people were hoping to see was not one of the answers listed, because there are many ways to create a wire map, some ways better than others. The way that's better isn't actually listed here. So that wasn't the question, though. The question said, which of the following, based on these 5 options, which of these would be the best way to create a wire map? So sometimes you don't have the best option available. Maybe the thing that you would use as the best option, it's not in your bag. I thought I packed that. It's not here. Oh, well, I got to do a wire map. What are my other options? Okay, now you know what the other options might be. So that's how you work through these things sometimes. Maybe the thing that you would use to create the wire map's broken, like it's not working. So what else can I use? So you got to MacGyver something else together. And you've got options, though, and it is one of these to be able to break that down. So hopefully you're familiar with what might be available to you. Let's see how you did with this one. A number of you are Googling this pretty good to be able to break it through. The question asks, which of the following would be the best way to create a wire map of an Ethernet cable? So would it be a multimeter, a loopback plug, a punch-down tool, a Wi-Fi analyzer, or a crimper? One of those. I always try to get an RDA reference in there somewhere. You'll find them. They're hidden. Let's see the results. It is Oh, we're a little torn. 35% said loopback plug. 29% said multimeter. 14% said crimper. 13% said punch down tool. And 10% said Wi-Fi analyzer. Double digits for every answer. This is one where we are really torn as to what this could possibly be. It could be anything on this list for these, according to our answers that we're getting here. So we want to create a wire map. What is going to be the best way to do it given these options? And the best way to do it given these options is a multimeter. Multimeter's probably the best option because it just does everything. It tells you AC voltage, it tells you DC voltage, and most importantly, it tells you continuity. Continuity is the important one here. Continuity means that you can put one of the pieces of the multimeter, one of those probes, on one end of a wire. You put the other probe on the other end of the wire, and if those two wires are touching each other, it will make a noise. It will beep at you. That is fantastic, which means I could put one of those probes on one pin, a pin 1 on the Ethernet cable on one side, put the other probe on pin 1 of the Ethernet cable on the other side, and if they make a noise, those two wires are connected. Now, if I go through each one of those wires, I start at pin 1 and go through all 8. Pin 2, go through all 8. Pin 3, go through all 8 on the other side. Pin 4, go through all 8 on the other side. I can create a map of what pins are connected to what pins on the other side. I know exactly where the wire goes all the way through the cable. That is a wire map. I've created a map of how the wire goes all the way through there. If it was a patch cable, pin 1 should go to pin 1, pin 2 should go to pin 2, pin 3 should go to pin 3, and so on. That's my wire map. If it's a loop, not a loop back cable, if it's a crossover cable, it'd be a different mapping of the wire from one side to the other. So very useful to have that functionality. In fact, on this multimeter, where's the continuity check? He's doing a voltage check. There's the continuity right there. See the little sound, little symbol for the speaker? Now, if I move that all the way down and stuck it on that, it would check for continuity. And it would make a beeping noise. In fact, if you touch the probes together, it would make a beeping noise. That's how you can test it. So that's pretty darn useful to have that there. Very nice to have that functionality. Knowing how to use a multimeter can be used for so many things in your world. It can be used in your car. It can be used in your house. It can be used for almost anything. It's such a useful set of skills to have. So I should probably do a video at some point of really how to use a multimeter because it's just so useful to have that functionality there. It's kind of scary to use because you're dealing with power sometimes, but as long as you're using the proper safety measures, you're safe. But a very, very useful tool to have there. Check the battery in your car. Check for resistance. Check for so much you can do with this. Continuity, though, means that we're able to have a wire that is connected on both ends. It's continuous. There is continuity between the two. So very useful to have that functionality. So what I would normally use is just a wire tester. It's a cable tester where you plug in the two test pieces on both sides, and it creates a wire map for you on the screen. It tells you where everything's connected. That's what I would use. That wasn't one of the options. I didn't give you that option specifically. So cable tester, most simple cable testers will create a wire map for you, or at least show you continuity of the 8 pins to make sure that the 8 pins are connected in the same way on both sides. But we didn't have the option. So what's your second best option? Multimeter. That was not the number one answer, though. The number one answer was a loop back plug. Loop back plug is extremely useful and valuable to have, but all a loop back plug does is take a signal going out of an interface. Now I'm caught on my chair with my headphones on. So what it does is take an interface, send data out of the interface, and it loops that signal back into the same interface. Usually it's just a tiny little square you plug into an interface. You can create a loopback plug on Ethernet, which simply takes those wires from transmit, sends them back into the receives. That's what it does. Very useful to have. Now, what a loopback plug is useful for is if you plug that in, why would you want to receive something that you just sent out? Why is that useful at all? Well, it's useful because you want to see if that interface is working properly. So you would send a byte of traffic out. It gets looped back and plugged right back in. I receive that byte of traffic and I look at it. Did I receive exactly what I sent? If it's different, something has gone horribly wrong. Something may be wrong with that physical interface. So that is extremely useful to have if you're trying to test hardware. So maybe it's a wide area network connection. Before you involve a wide area network provider, which is just going to tell you that the WAN is fine, that there's no errors, they're going to run their BERT test, B-E-R-T, BERT test. They're going to tell you it's fine. So check everything in your place. Check the cabling. Check the interface with their loopback cable. But the loopback plug is not going to tell you the pinouts of a cable. It will just tell you if a physical interface is working properly. So that's why we need that multimeter to be able to do that. Loopback plug's not going to help you with a wire map. Punchdown tools are extremely useful if you need to connect or reconnect wires to a punchdown block. Doesn't tell you anything about the wire map though. It's a physical, it's like a hammer, like you're hammering it into the wire block. So it's a hammer for for wires going into a block that you would have there for the punchdown. That punchdown block is extremely useful, but you need that punchdown tool to do it, but it won't tell you what's going through the Ethernet cable itself. It's sort of like a crimper, except it's for punchdown blocks. Think of it that way, which was why crimper wouldn't work either. Crimper is just a physical way to connect that RJ45 or RJ11 connection on the end of it. So that is why the crimper is not the right answer either. Crimper and punchdown tool are very similar in what they do. They don't tell you anything about it. They're just a physical connectivity device. And a Wi-Fi analyzer, great for analyzing wireless networks, for understanding what's happening over wireless frequencies. But we have a wired Ethernet cable. We have a wired connection. We have copper that we need to work through. So this Wi-Fi analyzer will not help us for copper. Not going to help us for those pieces. So wire mapping a cable can be very useful to have. And one of the simplest things you can do with a multimeter. So useful to have that functionality there. Hopefully that will help you as well as you're trying to figure out all of these other pieces and the multimeter. Now you'll notice as we go through this, these questions they're kind of shorter questions. They're kind of written in the study group to help you understand if you're getting some of the higher level perspective, the higher level characteristics of these exam objectives. These are not exactly designed to duplicate or emulate an actual exam. The actual exam questions can sometimes be more involved than this. So the questions I'm giving you today are not exactly what you would find along those lines. Instead, what I've done for an actual test, if you really want to test yourself to see, am I really ready to take this exam, then I've created for you a set of practice exams that does this, where I have tried to take the idea of and the scope of an actual exam and create for you 90 questions, 5 performance-based questions and 85 multiple choice-based questions, and multiply that 3 times. So I've got 3 separate exams that you could take in my practice exams book. That's what you would go to if you wanted a true difficulty level and simulation feel. I don't know about simulation, but certainly the wording of the exams, the tone of the exams, very similar to what you would find. So 370 pages long. This is a big book. It's a thick book of these exams in the physical version. This is the physical version of the exam, but it exists, has multiple choice-based questions. Well, I have it right here. So let's go through a question. Here's an actual question, A7. The question asks, a system administrator has connected an external USB drive to a computer to transfer some documents. When booting the computer, the system tries to boot from the external drive and gives an error message. Which of the following would be the best way to prevent the USB drive from booting? Should you modify the BIOS to boot from the internal hard drive? Should you modify the boot order in Windows Disk Management? Should you rebuild the MBR on the external hard drive? Or should you disable the external drive in Device Manager? You can see that's kind of a big set of questions. It's a big question, multiple sentences. It's got the same style as what you might find on an actual exam. Now, what would be the right answer with this one? We need to kind of break this down. And what I've done is you can go to a page that I call the quick answer, and you can click on this and just get the answer and know what it is. But one of the things that I did was create a more detailed answer for these. Please no answers in the chat room. I'm going to spend all the time here deleting instead of actually showing you the answer itself. The question asks for these and breaking it down. I'm going to click on this link, though, that shows the details. This is going to automatically jump to the answer page. And the answer page here shows you that the answer, well, if I have this set right, shows the answer is A, modify the BIOS to boot from the internal hard drive. And I give you the explanation of why I think that's the right answer. Because I say the boot order is managed in the system BIOS. And one way to avoid the computer from attempting to boot from an external storage device is to move the internal drive to have a higher boot priority. So that is the answer. Now, the problem is that I never get the answer right. I always get the answer wrong, but I don't know why I got the answer wrong. So for every answer in my book, every incorrect answer, I tell you why the incorrect answer is incorrect. So if you answered B, it would be Windows Disk Management is not used to configure the boot order of the computer. By the time Windows is loaded, the boot order has already been determined. The boot order is configured in the system BIOS. It's like, oh, that's why that's the wrong answer. Now I know when I take the exam why I should not answer that or why I should answer that. I understand more about what Windows Disk Management does and how it's not affected with the boot process. Or rebuild an MBR, and I gave you the explanation of why you should rebuild or not rebuild the MBR. Disable the external drive and device manager. I tell you why you should or should not. And once you go through that, if you still are not quite certain, I put a link to the video that explains the concept behind the question that was originally asked. So you always have a place to go to learn more. If the explanations just weren't enough, go figure that out in the video. And you can watch that and you click on these links, or if you've got a phone right now, you can put it up to your screen and get the QR code right from your camera. You don't have to take a picture of it. Just take the camera and put it there, and it will give you a link in your camera to open up the web page that has that video on it. Or you can simply click it, and it will link to that in your PDF. If you want to go back to the questions, I'm going to click the back button in my PDF reader. It takes me right back to the questions, and I can go to the next one. So it's a PDF. It's a book like this, but I've added these links to the book that allows you to go through it very methodically and jump around to exactly where you want to go. You can either take the whole thing at one time, get your answers, maybe put the answers on a different window, or you can go through them one by one like I just did here. That is my practice exams. So I think it's a valuable tool that you can use just before you're ready to take the exam to see how well you've really understood the concepts that were presented in the exam objectives. Something very useful there. Have there been any revisions or new versions since my first release of the practice exams? No, CompTIA does not change their exam objectives. So once the exam objectives are set, you're good. You don't have to worry about their things changing. They don't change anything. So you're good there. No problems with that. If they were to change their exam objectives for some reason, let's say tomorrow the Windows operating system stopped working for everybody and we all went to Mac and they changed the exam, I would have to change my practice exams. Fortunately, that hasn't happened. So there we go. That's where you would go. And these are $25 for each one of these, but if you purchase it with the course notes, you get a little bit of a discount. So there's a little bit extra in there. There's no change. There's no new additions. Once CompTIA introduces the exam objectives, they don't change. So fortunately, you don't have to worry about any new versions. There's no new additions. Everything's locked in. If you're studying for the 220-1001, these are the practice exams for you, and they will always be the practice exams for you to have that capability. Again, another great way to support the site, and thank you so much for your continued support. It really does go a long way. Let's do some more questions. Plenty more to go through. This is a pretty good one. Talk about being directly from the exam objectives. Here is a question that asks, what type of storage would include both a spinning drive and memory? Would it be SSD, EEPROM, NvMe, Blu-ray, or SSHD? What type of storage would include both a spinning drive and memory? Would it be SSD, EEPROM, NvMe, Blu-ray, or SSHD? You think you know the answer? Go to professormesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer. Please, no answers in the chat room. Have that there. We'll figure out the details with all of this. This is also a question that you may not think is so easy, and people who are just starting with this technology may not think it's easy either. So if you think it's easy, then you've done a great job in your studies, and you at least have that particular concept down. This is one of those challenges for people maybe you have not run into this in their studies. So we'll figure out the details for those. Oh, so you've phrased question. You would be willing to purchase another set of exams of their new ones. I wish I could create some new ones for you right now. It'd be a great idea to have some additional exams there. Right now, those are the only ones I have, unfortunately. It takes literally months to write one of those books. So that's one of those to break this down. That's why there aren't 4 or 5 books like this. I would love to have tons of practice exams for this. It just takes so long to write them. That getting one out for the 1001 and getting another one out for the 1002 was months of time in there to be able to have that. Hopefully you're familiar with all of those. Let's see how you did with this one and breaking this down. This question, you really got to understand these different technologies and what they are. And I abbreviated a lot of these because I didn't want to give too much away with this. The question was, what type of storage would include both a spinning drive and memory? Would it be an SSD, EEPROM, NVMe, Blu-ray, or SSHD? Let's see how we did with this one. 85% of you said it's SSHD, and then single digits for everything else. Just not even over 4% for everything else. SSHD seems to be the overwhelming answer. SSHD, of course, stands for solid state hybrid drive. These were really a little bit of a rage, if you will. They were pretty popular a couple years ago. Right in that time when we were transitioning from spinning hard drives and transitioning to SSD, there was this middle ground, the solid state hybrid drive, where there was SSD that would kind of be the front end of this, and then a spinning drive that was a traditional spinning magnetic drive where everything would be written to sort of offline, if you will. That was one implementation of an SSHD anyway. It's a normal sized 3.5-inch drive. It looks like a hard drive. It's just got SSD in there. But the prices on SSD dropped so quickly. If you recall, they were rolling out, Apple was rolling out Macs with solid state hybrid drives in them. Like a whole series of them were SSHDs. And very quickly, it really only took one generation of those, didn't it? Maybe not even a generation. Maybe they changed it right in the middle. Everything is now shifted to SSD. Like I'm still buying some spinning hard drives. I have a video coming out. I had a hard drive fail in my NAS over this past week, and I've got a great story about what I found when I took the drive out. What I found may surprise you. I'll have that video, maybe not with quite the link bait associated with it, but there's some interesting video I have when I took that drive out. I just haven't gotten the new drive. I got a new replacement drive that was broken. Did not work well. Had to send it back to Amazon, but they pack it like it's socks. They don't put anything around it. So it got here and it was broken. It's like an 8 terabyte drive I had to send back. They're sending back another 8 terabyte drive. So I'm still using spinning drives because I need large capacity drives for my NAS. For something like this, I'm shooting this and recording it. An hour is 250 to 500 gig of drive space. So plenty there. Yeah, I'm not going to do any of those thumbnails of me holding the drive and all surprised. We're not gonna do that. I don't do the It's Your Boy kind of videos, so that's not gonna happen. But it is gonna be an interesting video to have those pieces there. The hybrid drive is the right answer here. We weren't really fooling anybody. SSD is only memory, so very useful to have that, but not the right answer because there's no spinning drive in an SSD. The EEPROM, the erasable, programmable, read-only memory, the electronically erasable, programmable read-only memory. It's kind of a flash drive, right? So it's EEPROM. Have that there. Only 4%. No spinning drive in there either. NvMe. So again, having that memory-based storage is incredibly useful, but there's no spinning drive in the memory-based storage. And Blu-ray, spinning optical drive. No spinning drive and no memory, although that's definitely a spinning drive. There's no memory in a Blu-ray. It's optical only. So that would not be the right answer. The only choice we really have is the SSHD. That was the right answer. 85% got that one absolutely right. Well done there. If you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, then what you want to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a link there that says Contact Us. Click that Contact Us link, fill in your name, your email address, and in the subject line, put that this is the January 2021 A+ study group. Maybe Core 1 A+ study group if it helped me find it a little bit better. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, which is SSHD. SSHD is your super secret code word of the month. So go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put your name, your email address, subject line, Core 1, January 2021, just so I know where it's from. It can be in any format there. And then put on a line by itself with nothing else around it. So it's very obvious that I can see and find it easily because I go through these manually, SSHD. And then you can put anything else you'd like in there too. I do read through every single one of these you send to me. So please, if you have something you'd like to say, you said this was great, put it in there. Think this was lousy, put it in there. Tell me. I'll be glad to read it. It will hurt my feelings and it'll stay with me for weeks. Won't. I'll forget immediately. But at least I've read it, right? Sometimes you provide me with very good feedback and we're able to adjust things. So I like to hear from whatever you'd like to say. Feel free to send that there. Absolutely. Now, we've hit the top of the hour. I'm going to do one more question, though. We're going into overtime, and then I will take questions from the chat room. So here is our question that we have to follow up on that one. And let's see how we do. This question asks, which of the following is used to manage a virtual machine platform and guest operating systems? Is it a UEFI BIOS, a hypervisor, resource pooling, SAS, or an emulator? Which of the following is used to manage a virtual machine platform and guest operating systems? Is it UEFI BIOS, hypervisor, resource pooling, SAS, or emulator? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, lock in your answers. See if you know what that is. See if you understand that one and figure out the details of those. Hopefully you'll be familiar with that. That's one that I think you absolutely should know because the exam itself certainly has all of those answers in the exam objectives. So all of them are real answers to something, but only one is an answer to what this question is. So that is definitely where you will run into questions and have all of those there. See if you happen to know what it was. Figure out the details. Whenever I start going through there and trying to figure out all of these answers, I do try to find answers that come directly from the exam objectives to figure out those. Question in the chat room, do I offer a physical copy of my practice exam or just digital? There's the physical copy right there. Yep. And if you go to the page where you can purchase it, right underneath the pricing table is a button that says, looking for a physical copy? Click here and do the physical. Because I realize most people want a PDF, but I do. And if you buy the physical copy, you get the digital PDF for free. So you can download the PDF immediately while I'm shipping this to you. So it's really best of both worlds. You can't lose if you get the physical copy. You see, it's physical. You know that because it makes noise, I guess. That's one. And I kind of like having a book. Mrs. Professor Messer said you should do books because I was just going to do digital. But she said make a book version of it. She likes books too. So these are all printed on demand. So there's no waste. They come directly to you. In fact, and when it's printed for you. And it's printed for you and sent directly to you specifically. So that's one thing we do to help keep costs down and keep the less waste. So all of those. And I do feel like they're similar to the exam. I've written them specifically to have the same style, cadence, and difficulty level as the actual exam, but they are all original questions. I write all of the questions, all of the answers. I write everything. So I write all the explanations. I write them all. So I know that I've specifically written them to have the same feel because I wrote them that way, specifically for that reason. So there you go. So that's it. Now, if you wanted the physical version, you already ordered the digital, and you really want the physical book, send me a note. Hit the contact us link or open a ticket from your member login, and I can send you an upgrade link that will cover what you've already paid towards the cost of the physical version, so you don't lose any money. So there's that option too if you wanted to do that. More than happy to do it. Not doing Super Chat. I know I said I was going to do Super Chat. Tan was right. I said I was going to do Super Chat, and I didn't. I just haven't yet. It's one of those things. I really should do a Super Chat. I really should turn that on. Maybe you have encouraged me to do this for Thursday. For the same for course notes, same for everything. Yeah. Super Chat is the enhanced YouTube chat where you can contribute or do different things. See, I'd like to do a Super Chat, but I want to do it right. I want to do it so that if you contribute, you get like something out of it. You get like the stickers or whatever they have in there for you. Be kind of fun. Let's see how you did with this one. Which of the following is used to manage a virtual machine platform and guest operating systems? Is it a UEFI BIOS, a hypervisor, resource pooling, SAS, or an emulator? We can do that to show the results. 81% of you say hypervisor. Again, single digits. Did we do that right? Is that really the right answer? Did we have all of those to have all of that? Well, yep, it is hypervisor. That is a virtual machine manager. We sometimes will refer to this as a hypervisor. And it manages the virtual platform and the guest operating systems. That's what it does. It's kind of the middleman between the virtual world and the physical world. There needs to be something that manages that process. So hypervisor is absolutely what does that. Often this requires a CPU that specifically has virtualization capabilities built into the hardware of the CPU. So make sure that the CPU you are using can do that. Otherwise, you're probably going to get a message in your hypervisor saying, I can't work properly because your CPU doesn't support me. You may have to use a different manufacturer's hypervisor, different software that can work without that. It's getting harder and harder to do that these days, though. It's becoming more common to see the hardware functionality in the CPU itself. So something needs to manage that CPU, the memory, the networking, all the interactions between the virtual machines and the physical world. That's what does it. It's your hypervisor. That is the right answer. Not really a difficult question for that. The UEFI BIOS is the basic input-output system of your computer. The BIOS itself is not used to manage a virtual machine platform, although that is the section in the BIOS, the settings, where you might turn on or turn off the functions of the CPU that manage the hardware-based virtualization. So there are some settings in there you might want to change, but that's not what actually manages the virtual machine platform or the guest operating systems. So there you go. Resource pooling is a cloud-based functionality where you would kind of collect all your memory and your drive space and everything in one place, and then you kind of carve off of that pool as you need it for the virtual machines. That's not what manages that process. That is simply a place where your resources live. Something has to manage the processes to have those there. We've got SAS, another option there, software as a service. But that software as a service is a type of cloud-based infrastructure. It's not something that manages a virtual machine platform or guest operating systems. And then an emulator is a type of software that allows us to run software that was written for a completely different type of computing system on our existing computing system. So if you were to being able to run a software that was built for, a good example of this, the emulators you see for games, you could run Atari 2600 games on your Windows computer. The Atari 2600 was not written with Intel in mind. It has to emulate the processor used in the 2600 to be able to run it in a Windows platform. So that is an emulator. Yeah, the Nintendo people are, I see ya. That's exactly what you would do with that. So the best answer here, the only answer here, the one that makes sense, hypervisor, that is the right answer. Well done with that. There's different types of hypervisors, some that run as software in an existing operating system, some that run as right on the hardware itself. That's a little bit outside the scope of the A+ exam, but you'll see different types are referenced there as well. Well, how much do you know that you should study associated with these? Well, everything you should study is in the exam objectives. Grab the exam objectives. You can find a link to them at professormesser.com/objectives, or go to the Google machine and type in CompTIA Exam Objectives. It'll take you right there. That's what you should download. They are an amazing checklist that should be the first thing you download and look through. It should be the checklist you use as you're going through your studies. It should be your last checklist you go through before you take your exam to make sure you've really studied everything you need to know. People ask me all the time, what do I really need to know for my exam? It's everything that's in those exam objectives. That's what you need to know. Get that list. It's not an overview. It is a detailed analysis of everything you need to know. It is exactly what you should know for the exam. Make sure you're familiar with it. So I have more study groups coming up. These dates are wrong. We're already past the 7th because I changed the date for this one. You'll notice I pushed it from last month. So I wrote this like last month. So this is one where 2 days from now, on the 14th, we're doing it a week later. So January 14th. But the February dates, as far as I know, are still February 9th and February 11th. These dates tend to change, though. They tend to change all the time. Times change. My world is a weird one. So make sure you always check in to see when the next event is going to be. You can always find out at professormesser.com/calendar, or just click the calendar link that's on the menus at the top of the website. That will take you to the calendar. You'll see everything. Whenever I change the dates, first thing I do is update the calendar. So the Google Calendar is updated and the calendar on my site is updated. So if you're monitoring or following either of those, you'll know immediately. It'll update immediately on there. So it's an easy way to do it. So instead of January 7th, see what this should show. It's not the 12th. You actually have to type things at 14th. There we go. So come back in 2 days and we'll do the study group then. See how easy that was? Why couldn't I do that to begin with? Well, there it is. Now you know when the next event's going to be. We'd love to have you over here to do more of those. Wow, that was an hour of Q&A. We did really, really quickly to break those out. Maybe I talked a little bit too much. Don't forget about my course notes and practice exams. You'll find them on my website at professormesser.com/1001success. Stick around for the next hour. I'm going to take questions from you. We'll open up the phone lines. I'll see if I can get all of these things working anyway. Don't forget about the daily pop quiz questions, which are available on Twitter, on email, on YouTube. You can get our latest videos. All my questions are also on Instagram now. If you're an Instagrammer or you just like pretty pictures with your questions, they're all on Instagram. professormesser.com/Instagram is a great way to do it. So hopefully that can get you there too. Thank you for being here in this first hour. Stick around for the next hour. I'm going to open up phone lines. We'll take questions from the chat room. We'll figure out the details of that. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time on the A+ study group. Oh, I wish I could get more questions. There's just so much we have to do in such a short period of time, isn't it? But that's okay. We can answer questions now to go through all of these. Plus, by the way, you can go through all the previous study groups, which are archived on my site and in my YouTube playlist with all of the timestamps. So you can shotgun right through them. Boom, 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 boom. Go through all those pieces. Let me get the phone lines up and running, which I did not set up prior to this. So this takes me a moment. Let me go to my shows. I did a presentation for I did a technology keynote for a summit that was happening in Mexico prior to this. So I was sort of already had a live stream. So that was my Zoom that I did prior to this. And so I didn't set up a lot of things I normally set up here. So that's why you're having to deal with my lateness. It's all on me. I'm so sorry to have this here. And there's somebody at my front door. Don't know who, but there you go. Let me call into my own show and we will make this happen if I can figure out where I am and what I'm doing. And then I'll tell you how you can call in to this show as well. You're welcome for me doing that. I need to type in some numbers on my screen with a pound sign.
Enter your 6-digit PIN.
Well, I'll certainly do that. It is this number. I've almost memorized it at this point. Is that right?
Welcome, Professor Messer.
Thanks, nice lady. That gets me in. That means you can also call in if you would like to. I will take questions from the chat room, so feel free to put those. There's a couple of have come in there to be able to see that already. But you can also call in with a telephone, with a voice communication. It's a toll-free number in the continental U.S., 855-785-RJ45. West of the Rockies, 855-785-7545 will also get you there. There is also free calling on Skype. It's a toll-free number, which means no Skype minutes are required, which means you can call anywhere from anywhere in the world for free. In the world. I guess internationally and outside the world, you could call for free as long as you had Skype. So from the International Space Station, you put a +1 at the beginning, +1, 855-785-7545. You could do that as well. Do they do Skype from the International Space Station? I'm not sure they do. I'm not sure that would be a valuable use of bandwidth from the International Space Station. So probably not what they're dealing with either to have all of those. So questions from the chat room. Can I give you a mnemonic for how to recall what raids do what? I really don't have, I'm not huge on mnemonics. And the problem really is recovery if the data is lost. I think it's one of those situations where it's better. The one that I always know is RAID 0 is 0 redundancy. That's kind of the most useful one. 0 is 0 redundancy. 1 is a mirror. If you have 1, then you've got another 1. There you go. There's RAID 1. So there's my mnemonics, and RAID 5 is the other one. I don't know. So RAID 5 is the other option with parity. How do you fit RAID 5 and parity together? I don't know. RAID 5 is if 5 is an odd number. Well, 1's an odd number. That doesn't work either. We'll have to work on that, won't we? Have all of those. RAID 10 is 1 and 0. Well, that one's easy because they are together. RAID 1 and 0 is RAID 10 is RAID 1 and 0. It's literally what RAID 10 is 1 and 0 stuck together. So that is kind of a built-in mnemonic, I guess, if you will, to have that there. Can you have a RAID configuration with a hard drive, SSD, or NvMe combination? Absolutely. In fact, my NAS, my network attached storage device, has the ability to put an SSD as a front-end cache. So it will, when you're writing information to a hard drive, that's usually the slowest part. So you're writing information in, I can send it over the network into that. It's cached up in the SSD, and then hopefully it's smaller than what the SSD will support. And then when you're done sending it, it will start writing it to the slower hard drive. Very common to see in NAS and storage devices to have that caching in the front end. I'm looking at getting a newer NAS that instead of using a SATA connected SSD, which is what this one supports, there's a newer model that has an NvMe SSD type connection for that. So it's very nice to have that caching functionality, almost like a RAM cache, almost as fast, but with the SSD or NvMe technology, which is still pretty quick. Not as fast as normal RAM, but still pretty darn quick to have that there. Very, very useful. And NAS is very, very functional. I have a Synology NAS, and I can't talk more about what I'm doing with it. Once I get I have a replacement drive coming tomorrow. Hopefully I'll be able to finish the video over the next number of days. But that will be, it'll be interesting to show you what I found in there when I pulled that drive out. And whether that was something important or not. We will find out. Let's go to the phone calls. Feel free to put your questions in the chat room. I'll watch as they go by. But we'll now go to the phone lines, the 978 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Greg. I'm calling from Boston, Massachusetts.
Greg from Boston. Thanks for calling, Greg. What can we do for you?
First of all, I just want to say Happy New Year. And second, so I took the test for A+ recently and just barely failed. I got a 655. And I just wanted to see if you had any recommendations. I got your test. I got Dion's test. And I did a lot of practice testing. I just want to see, what's your recommendation on going through the test and seeing these difficult worded questions and having answers that look the same, like how to go through and how
Right.
to answer these questions that they give you when problem solving, I guess. Like any recommendations?
This is sort of one of the biggest challenges of the exam is sometimes it turns into a reading comprehension exam instead of what you know about the technology exam. Unfortunately, it's just sort of the industry in general. It's not something specific to CompTIA. It's kind of what we do in the industry is make these very difficult exams to read. The thing I would probably recommend first, you're so close. You practically passed the exam if you were that close to it. I think that a summary of what you missed on the exam is going to help you a bit. So if you haven't already, there is a summary of the exam on your online account with Prometric, not Prometric, the Pearson VUE, and you can download the exam results. The exam results don't tell you a lot of detail, but they will tell you how many questions you missed from a certain section of the exam objective. So you might see that, wow, I missed a lot more from domain 1 than I missed from domain 4. And it even goes into the dots, the specific sections of that domain where you missed those particular questions. So that might be a very good resource. You may find that all your questions were cloud-based questions, or all the things you missed were troubleshooting questions. Okay, well, now I know where to focus my efforts to study. It should be from those particular areas, probably most of all, so that you can kind of get a feel for what you got right and what you got wrong. They obviously don't tell you the exact questions. Kind of have to remember that yourself. That's why I always tell people, write down as much as you can when you come out of there if you didn't pass. That way you can at least look up some of those topics because they might come up again on another exam. The next exam you take will be completely different, of course, in its selection of questions, but you might get some duplicates. It's not that big of a question pool. So if you do get some of those duplicates, that can only help you going into this the second time. That's probably the part that I would recommend the most. Which one was it? It was the Core 1 or the Core 2 you took?
Core 1.
Okay. So you've got some things. We know that there's a lot of memorization of topics. Hopefully you were able to see from the exam that there's certain things I think people focus on, as it turns out, weren't that important for the exam. And there are other things that people focus on or don't focus on that probably were more listed on the exam. People tell me all the time, wow, I got more cloud-based questions than I was expecting. Okay, then we know we should probably study up more on the cloud. Or maybe it wasn't that way. Depends. And of course, it's going to depend on what the mix was for your particular exam. Other people spend a lot of time, for some reason, on the color of wires with power. Except none of that's listed in the exam objectives. So that's the balancing act you kind of have to work on is if it's in the objectives, I always tell you that's where you should focus. But don't go outside the scope of that because usually they don't ask questions about that. Is that sort of the experience, without saying anything specific about the exam because we can't because you signed your candidate agreement, but was that kind of the experience you had with the exam?
Yes, exactly the experience.
Okay. Well, at least now you're so close. I think just another run through and you're good. Did you take the exam at home?
I took it actually in person.
And I can't say I blame you. That's the way I would do it right now too. I guess it's kind of a trade-off. I find that to be the easiest way to do it instead of worrying about setting up my house for that setup. So I think that part of it's good. I think you're in a good place and there's everything set up. You just walk in and you take the exam. There's no worries or concern that someone isn't going to show up and proctor your exam properly or things are going to crash in the middle. You're in a good place. So I think you're doing everything right. I think now it's just a matter of finding the things where you need to kind of cinch up those topics a little better and go walk in and take it again. I think you're going to do fine.
All right. Thank you.
Best of luck, Greg. Let us know how it goes.
All right. I will.
Thanks for the call. That's always a challenge. I've failed plenty of industry certification exams. It's not fun at all. It's not a great situation to go through. But you don't fail unless you just stop right here. If you didn't go back and take the exam again to pass it, that's failure. If you take it 5 times and on the 5th time you pass it, that's success. Nobody's counting the number of times you take an exam, thankfully. I'd been in trouble. They count that you passed it. That's all they care about. And if you can just keep going until you pass it, you're certified. You're good. You got that one. I guess you have to get both your Core 1 and Core 2. You're half certified. Not even half certified. You're not certified until you do both, but at least you got that one done. You won that particular round. So very important to know what all those might be. Let's go back to, very quickly, I saw the question come up about questions in what versions of Windows are covered on Core 1 and Core 2. Core 1 doesn't have a lot of operating system specific questions, but the ones that are there are related to Windows, kind of a generic Windows. If you know Windows 10, you're kind of covered. The ones for Core 2 are listed in the Core 2 exam objectives. So Windows 7, Windows 8/8.1, and Windows 10. Although these days, if you sort of know Windows 10, you kind of covered the bases. You kind of know all the others too. There's some minor changes, obviously, between versions, but the high points are pretty much the same between all three of those. Let's go back to the phones. The 513 area code. Thanks for holding. Which name are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Charlie, and I'm calling from Cincinnati, Ohio. How are you doing today?
Hey, Charlie. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Hey, yeah. So I've been, I kind of went all out, and I went and bought your practice exams, your notes, and I've been watching your videos, and specifically, I'd go through each video. I would take the link down. I used a OneNote to do this, and then I would use a snip to snip each slide you do, and I'd take my own notes, and then from there, I've gone through all of my notes, and I've been taking flashcards through Quizlet to do so, and I've had a little trouble with memorizing the common network ports from section 2.1.
Yeah.
So just for an example, I'll go with FTP, the file transfer protocol. I have both of the ports listed, the TCP port 20 and TCP port 21. Do I need to know more specifics about FTP, like the ability to configure a username and password to gain access to another system, the anonymous log support, and the full feature functionality, or is it more or less knowing the port numbers themselves?
The overall view of this from the exam is understanding what port number is used by this. That is important to know that FTP uses 20 and 21. The probably more importantly to go along with this is linking together the port number and the functionality of it. So a lot of I give some context so people know here's what this does. You can log in anonymously. You can control when you log in with FTP, you can set up folders and you can transfer files, and it's a file transfer protocol. It does a lot of that functionality. That's to give you that broader scope of what CompTIA is asking about, because CompTIA will not ask you a trivia question like what port number is used by SSH. They will never ask that. You will never see that on an exam. Instead, they will give you a story about how this will work. They will say a network technician is connecting to a remote device over an encrypted terminal connection. Which port number is most likely in use? That's what they're going to give you. Notice nowhere in there they mentioned SSH, but they might give you answers that is it TCP 21, TCP 22, TCP 23, TCP 25, TCP 53. You have to know what it is. They didn't really ask you anything about SSH. It wasn't in the question. You had to know that an encrypted terminal communication across the network to another machine, that's SSH. And then you have to put together, SSH is port 22. You have to kind of make that multiple step to be able to pull that in and do something with it. So that's what I would also recommend you do, is understand that as a broader scope of what's going on. If you're spending all your time going DNS 53, HTTP 80, IMAP 143, that's useful to a point, but it's not far enough. You have to know HTTP port 80 commonly used for your browser to talk to a web server. DNS, UDP port 53, commonly used to resolve a name and an IP address together, talks out to a DNS server, and you get a response back. That's what you need to know. That's the level of detail. You don't have to go much farther than that. CompTIA is not going to ask you about the details of FTP's underlying administrative functionalities. They really just want to know, how are you going to transfer files? Okay, I'd use FTP on ports 20 and 21. That's what they're going to want to know. As long as you know that level, you're kind of done. You don't have to go any deeper than that. You don't have to have an integrated understanding of the sub-protocol functionality or additional things that it does on the back end. Just have a broader view of RDP is remote desktop protocol. You use it with Microsoft's terminal services client. It gives you a full screen graphical remote control of somebody's desktop, and it uses TCP port 3389. That's it. That's all you need to know. So that's sort of the scope they're looking for. You don't have to go any deeper than that, Charlie.
All right, cool. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I think you answered my question. And I think that was a good general response to a lot of my other questions, I would say, for the exam as a whole. So I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate the call. Stick to the exam objectives and you're fine. People in the chat were asking, what is this on the screen? What are you looking at? These are the exam objectives. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the top. Scroll. So at the very top of this looks familiar? The CompTIA A+ Certification Exam Core 1 Objectives. This is what you can download by going to professormesser.com/objectives or typing in CompTIA Exam Objectives from the Google machine. This, of course, tells you about the exam, gives you a breakdown of what the percentages are, but look at the detail that's in here. So this is section 2.1, compare and contrast TCP and UDP ports, protocols, and their purposes. So this is the objectives list. So when I've had people come into my chat room and they've told me, wow, I took the exam and I just failed miserably. You know, they asked me about TCP port 22. How was I even supposed to know they were going to ask that? I said, well, didn't you get the objectives? Oh, I didn't download those. I just figured they were a broad overview of the topics, not understanding that this is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of exam objectives that tell you exactly what you need to know for the exam. There it is. That's it. You need to know what it is. There it is. This is what I build on my videos from, because CompTIA stays so close to these. They don't deviate much from this list, which is why I tell people, if you know what's in this exam objective list, you've now studied this, you know what they're asking about, you have an understanding of each one of these, you can check off each one of these in the list, you're going to do fine on your exam. You're going to have no problem with your exam. Look, it just goes on and on. There's just, look how many pages this is. There's a lot in here. So that's why I tell people that's what you need to do. Same thing for this exam too. The port numbers, same idea. I don't really have an acronym for memorizing port numbers. The way that most people memorize port numbers is you just use them all the time. You set up a firewall rule to allow or not allow them. You're looking through the rules that are already in your computer. A lot of these you already know. You know, port 80 is a web server. Okay, that one's done. So a lot of these just get locked in. 443 is the SSL, the TLS that we're using to talk to websites. So some of these are very common. You just have to make them more common for you. Set up a rule in the firewall, in your Windows firewall or another firewall, to allow or disallow access to a certain service, and put those port numbers in there. Link to the objectives, professormesser.com/objectives. How to learn all the objectives? The easy way is you watch my course. I guess that's the easy way. Get a good book. Watch a video course. Get some hands-on. Take some practice exams. Quite honestly, there's no easy way. The answer to your question is there's not one. If it was an easy way, everybody would already be certified. It's always a hard way. These are very broad exams that ask a lot of detailed technical questions. So it's not something I can tell you there's an easy way. It's just a lot. I know. I'm sorry that's the answer, but that sort of is the answer. Back to the phone lines. Thanks for holding for so long. 801 area code. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hey, my name is Jeffrey. I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. How are you, Professor?
Hey, Jeffrey, beautiful out there. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I actually had two questions, just kind of general about terms and functions. One of which came up when I was watching a video this last week, said clock speed does not necessarily equal transfer rate. What's kind of the significance then of clock speed? Where does it apply when we're looking at those computer specs?
One of the problems in these computers is they just keep going faster and faster and faster and faster. And if you have to have in the computer something keeping track of the speed. You can think of it as if some of you are grown up taking music lessons. You've always had a metronome. It's that thing that sits on the top of the piano. Click, 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 click. Kind of keeps the pace as you're doing your lesson and you're playing the song so that you're able to do it in time with everything else. Where your computer also has a metronome. It's the clock. It's the internal clock of the computer. It's the one thing that everybody can listen to so that when we're transferring information, everybody's doing it at the same time. Tick, tock, tick, tock. So everybody knows when they should expect more data to arrive and when they should expect no data to arrive. So there's a constant tick tock inside of your computer. The problem, though, is the CPUs have gone really, really fast. Your memory's now going really, really fast. And if you were to get a metronome that was now able to go as fast as your internal clock of your CPU, it'd be a metronome that was going really, really quickly. And it would cost a lot more to find a metronome because these system clocks are technically a sort of a crystal. If you want to think of it this way, it's a piece of the earth that has a way to keep track of this without losing its time. So this is a great thing to have in your computer, but you can't make these go any faster than what they're already going without spending a whole lot of money. And on our computers, we don't want to spend a lot of money. We'd like to spend less money. So what we've done is instead of having an internal clock that goes as fast as your CPU, what if your internal clock goes half the speed of your CPU? What if your internal clock goes a quarter of the speed, a tenth of the speed of your CPU? It's still keeping time. Your computer just knows there's going to be 2 extra cycles between every tick of the clock and the oscillation that goes back and forth with that clock. So that's why we tell people the clock speed, when we say your clock, the internal clock of your computer runs at a particular speed, that may be a completely different rate than the speed of your memory sending information. Your memory may be running twice as fast. It may be running 4 times as fast. It may be running 10 times as fast, but it's running at a much faster rate than the internal clock of a motherboard. Now, the reality is most of us have no idea what the clock speed is of our motherboard. Most computers are rated, for better or worse, on the clock speed of the CPU. We often look at the CPU as being, oh, that's how fast the computer is running. That's not exactly an accurate perspective these days because they're multi-core CPUs. The operating systems and application uses the cores in different ways, but we're still sort of using that. That and the memory speed are 2 good ways to understand how fast a computer is going to go, and we sort of use those broadly. But that's why when you see in my videos and other places say the actual speed of your computer is probably very different than the clock speed of your motherboard, that's what we're referring to.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense then. And if you've got time, I had one general question about RAID as well.
Oh, sure.
Just curious about the difference, and this actually came from one of your pop quizzes recently, between, if a drive goes bad, what's the actual difference between restoring from backup and regenerating the array? What's that process?
It's all about the amount of redundancy you have. And this is the thing that is the key to RAID, is redundancy. I know it says sort of the R in RAID is redundancy, but as we know, if you're running RAID 0 means there's 0 redundancy. We're striping across drives, but if we lose a drive, you've now lost all the data. You've lost a portion of the data across the entire set of data store that's there. So even if you replace that drive, you're never getting that back. It's gone forever. There's no redundancy. So if you're running RAID 0 and you lose a drive, you have to fix the bad drive and restore everything from a known good backup, because after all, RAID is not backup. Not sure if everybody heard that properly. RAID is not backup. So you have to have a backup of your RAID array so that if you lose a RAID 0 drive, for example, you can restore for backup. Now, technically speaking, if it's those other types of RAID, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 1.0, those all have redundancy. And in fact, the drive I lost this past week in my RAID array, my data is still there because I was running kind of a flavor of RAID 5 in my RAID array. So I lost a drive, but it's still up and running. There's still, all of my data is still there. I can still access it. I can still write to that drive. It's running exactly the way it was before I lost that drive by design, because those types of RAIDs have redundancy built into them. So if I needed to restore this, I ordered a new drive, I plug in the new drive, it regenerates, in my particular case, the data that was there because I have parity, and then now everything's got redundancy again. Now, if I lose a drive, because I'm now waiting on a replacement drive from Amazon because I'm a dummy and didn't have one here, if I lose another drive in that array, I lose all my data. And I've got to restore from backup, because currently I lost the only redundancy I have in my RAID 5, my type of RAID that I'm running. And now I have to make sure I don't lose another one or I'm in big trouble. So that's why we say in some cases you will have to restore from backup, which means you were running RAID 0, or you would regenerate or remirror in the case of RAID 1 if you replace the drive. You don't have to restore from backup because you didn't lose anything. That's the real deal.
Okay, yeah. So I was just getting confused on terms where I was viewing the redundancies in RAID as backup. But with that not being the case, as long as there's a redundancy, it just has to regenerate and it's good to go. Is that right?
That is right. And it's the nuance between having a redundancy versus having a backup. A backup is a copy that can never change once we've made that copy. If we have, for example, let's say I have a spreadsheet. I've been working on the spreadsheet for a year. It's on my RAID array. And one day I'm not paying attention. I go into the spreadsheet. I delete everything in the spreadsheet and I hit the save button. Whoops. Well, I need to go back and get a backup of that one. It's not going to be in my RAID array. I just overwrote it on my RAID array. Where's the backup? I should have also had a backup somewhere that I can go get a copy of that. RAID is just a way to stay up and running temporarily if there happens to be a drive failure. But it is not a way to recover data if you ever need to go back and get that data. So you not only need RAID, but you also need backup of that. An important distinction. Thank you for bringing it up.
Absolutely. And thank you. That's a great explanation.
Best of luck, and let us know how it goes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Beautiful out there in Salt Lake City. Me and the Mrs. Professor Messer were just talking about Salt Lake City, how awesome it is out there. She needs to go out west in the winter, clearly. I'm in Florida in the winter. So I'm in Florida always, not just in the winter. So that's one of those that sometimes nice. Us in Florida sometimes want to go where it's cold. I don't know why that is, but there it is. Let's go to 732. Thanks for holding for so long. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how's it going? My name is Danny, and I'm from New Jersey.
Hey, Danny. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yes, I actually have two questions like the other gentleman before me.
Sure.
Can you tell me the difference, like, for instance, on VGA, it says right here that this is an analog signal, and, for instance, HDMI is a digital signal. Can you tell me the difference between visual and digital, please?
I'll give you a sort of a quick understanding of this, and we can kind of think of it in the way that you might listen to the radio. Many of our cars still have AM, FM radios inside of them. I think most of us have a familiarity with AM and FM radio. AM especially is one that you would run into when you start listening to the radio, AM radio specifically in your car, and you start driving around and you're driving outside the AM radio signal, you start getting a lot more static. You start hearing a lot more noise on that AM radio signal. It's sometimes hard to understand what they're saying. And when you go completely outside of the range of that AM, you lose the signal completely. But at least somewhere in there, you were able to listen for a very long time and make out what they were saying. But eventually you just lost the signal completely when you got out of range. And if you drove back the other direction, it would get louder and louder and easier to hear, and it was better. That's an analog signal. There's sort of a nuance to the signal that gets better or worse the farther away. Same thing with a VGA signal. If you plug into a VGA monitor over a 3-foot cable, you get a crystal clear picture. If you get a 25-foot VGA cable, it starts losing the signal as it goes to there, and you start getting blurriness on the screen because the signal is just not as good as it could be. But at least you're able to make out a little bit of what's on the screen. It works a little bit. You can at least see on the screen what you're trying to do. It's just a little blurry. Maybe there's a ghosting effect on the screen on VGA because it's an analog signal that's being used between the VGA card and your monitor. With a digital signal, you either see it or you don't see it. It's either on the screen perfectly or it's not on the screen perfectly. And then many of us that have plugged in HDMI have seen this. You've seen a part of the HDMI blockiness. Suddenly it got very blocky on the screen. The part of the screen you're just missing it. You see some of the screen, but other parts of the screen are just black. There's nothing there. That blockiness is the digital signal dropping out. The digital signal, maybe you had a very long HDMI cable and you plugged it in. Some of the signal's getting through, but some of the signal we just aren't able to make up on the other side. But you don't get a degrading of the signal. You get just a complete missing of the signal. You either receive the 1 and 0 or you did not receive the 1 and 0. So that's one of those situations where HDMI will work, it'll work, and then at some point, it just stops working when you get to a certain distance. And that's why that digital signal set up that way. And that's one of the main differentiations between those signal types, especially when trying to see them on your monitor or on your television, is knowing the difference between the analog and the digital. They do broadcast in different ways and are able to communicate in different ways. And that's how we visually will see the differences between analog and digital on our screen itself.
Okay, I see. That's actually a perfect example. That completely makes sense. And I have another question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I know on the switch and on the hub, basically, you're allowed to plug in multiple devices on the network. Can you tell me the difference between a switch and hub? Because I get confused a little bit, especially when looking at the CompTIA, like the objectives. It says, you got to distinguish the difference between a switch and a hub. Don't they do the same thing? They allow you to connect multiple devices together to a network?
At a very functional level, you are correct. They are effectively providing me with the exact same service, is that I can plug into this device and all of the devices on my network are connected to each other through the switch or through a hub. They effectively, to me as the end user, they're doing the same thing for me. There's no difference in those two things. The real difference, though, is that the switch is much more intelligent. The switch is able to determine where to send the signal based on what the destination is. Let's say you're plugging into a switch or a hub that has 16 devices on it. You can get some pretty big hubs back in the day. You don't see hubs anymore. You can't buy hubs anymore. They don't make hubs anymore. You got to go to eBay and buy a hub these days if you want one. Everything's a switch. But back in the day, you used to get these big multi-port hubs, 16 ports, 24 ports. They were big hubs. And you plug in all 24 devices. With a hub, whenever I would send information into that hub and there were 24 devices, the other 23 devices on the hub would see whatever I was sending in. That's how it's able to get the data from one side to the other, is I send it in one interface and it gets broadcasted out every single other interface that's on the hub. Broadcast is probably a bad term to use. It's transmitted out every other interface on that hub. And then by doing that, the hub can be assured that whoever this packet was for, it got there because I sent it to every interface on that particular hub. We often refer to hubs as multi-port repeaters because that's really what they are. You put it in one interface, it gets repeated out every other interface of the hub. It's a pretty dumb device. It's a pretty stupid device. It doesn't know where anybody's connected. It just sends it out to every port and hopes for the best. Hopefully, whoever this is for is going to hear it because I'm sending it out everywhere. A switch, however, much more intelligent. A switch has a way inside of it to keep track of where all the devices are that are communicating to it. It knows the MAC address of every device plugged into it. So if you're sending a piece of information into the switch, The switch is going to look up in a table. Oh, you're sending this to the printer. I happen to know the printer's plugged into port 15. I'm going to send that frame that you're sending just to port 15. It's not going to any other port on this switch. And so it's much more efficient. It conserves bandwidth. You can have multiple people communicating at the same time. They never know that anybody is communicating with anybody else because the communication is directed to each other on a switch. Much more intelligent, much faster, much easier on a way to manage the network. And that's why you see everybody using switches these days, and you don't see any hubs anywhere on anything. It is all inside of these switches. They're a much better way to... We moved to switches like overnight. Once we found switches, we drop hubs like they were a bad habit. We got rid of them. We threw them out of our networks. We bought switches and put them in practically overnight. It was such a dramatic change to the industry that we immediately moved to that technology. And that's why these days all you find is switches.
All right. Thank you very much for the help, and I hope you have a great New Year, sir.
Thanks,
Thank you
Danny.
very much.
Same to you. Appreciate it. That's why I remember putting in my first Xylan switch. We plugged that thing in. I'm like, this is amazing. This technology is remarkable. It was really when switching, we hit that point, we're able to do all of this technology at wire speed in the hardware of the device using these ASICs. It changed everything with networking. But you do have to know the difference. You will occasionally run into somebody who's got a switch plugged in the back room. And I guess there is some context to understanding the history that is important. Why are these switches useful? Well, if you didn't know how we used to do it, you wouldn't understand how awesome these switches are. So I guess that is a good reason to keep talking about hubs. You just see fewer and fewer and fewer these days. So that's the important part of understanding those pieces. Let's go back to the phones. Been holding forever. Thank you so much for calling 862 area code. Which name are you calling from?
Thank you so much for calling.
Oh, hear me.
862 area code. Which name?
You might want to pick up on that.
Hey, my name is Johnny. I'm calling from New Jersey.
Hey, Johnny from Jersey. What can we do for you?
Hey, I don't want to get a little too off topic, but I just recently got into A+, and what I have been finding is, like, when trying to find a job, no one's really hiring just because, like, understandably, I don't have the experience and I don't have the certifications really. So I was wondering, with just your knowledge, is there some avenue or some way that I should be sticking to in order to get like those entry level or like apprentice positions?
There are some recommendations I can give you. And this is one of the biggest challenges we have. One of the biggest challenges people tell me about when we're discussing this is how to get a job in IT if you don't have any experience. This is, of course, the big problem that we all have with the sort of the industry is it's that catch-22 is how do I get the experience if you're not going to give me a job and give me the experience? That's really the issue. I have created a video. You'll be able to see it over my shoulder here. How to get an IT job without experience. This is an answer, by the way. This video itself is 30 minutes long. That's how long it takes me to answer this question because this is chock full of details about how could you possibly get an IT job if you don't have any experience to start with in the beginning. This is on my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for how to get an IT job without experience, Professor Messer. It will find that for you. And I break it down into 4 primary areas of things you should focus on. I call them the 4 elements of getting an IT job with no experience. One is a formal education. One is IT certifications. One is experience. And one is your relationships, who you know in the industry. All 4 of those are incredibly important. All 4 of those you can build on without ever having an IT job. And I give you ideas in this video of labs you can set up at home that will give you technical stories that you could talk to people about when you go into an interview. You know, if you set up your own firewall and IPS at home and you plug it into your internet connection and you watch what's coming in your internet connection, it will scare you. It will shock you. You will have tons of stories to tell about the viruses, the worms, the attacks people are trying against your systems. It's all going to be in your log files. It's all in this video where I try to break down for you, how can you get a formal education? What should you do with that formal education? How can you get IT certification? Is it good or is it bad, and why? How do I get some type of experience? Can I do volunteer work? Can I create my own lab? Should I do both of those? I give you examples in the video. And the last one I probably never say enough and is pretty important is, how do you find someone who's already working there? How do you build these industry relationships? I talk about in my industry or in my career, I had about 15 jobs. Some of those jobs I moved within the same company. Some I moved from company to company. But overall, I had about 15 jobs through my career. With the very first job, I didn't know anybody who worked at that company I started working for. To this day, I don't know why they hired me, but they did. So thank you. But every other job after that, all 14 of the jobs I got after that, I knew someone who worked there. And it's not like you have to have a close relationship with them. You don't have to go out to dinner with them on the weekends. You don't have to go to their child's recital, but you do have to know them at least professionally. Maybe you're in the same Microsoft user group. Maybe you met each other at a conference, but you start to get these names and you get to know who's in your area. At that point, you can now reference them in the meeting. Oh, I'm here. I heard about the job. I talked to Bob in IT about this job. They don't even have to be in IT. Bob in accounting, I know, is my next door neighbor. He talked to me about this job. I thought I would come in and talk to you guys because Bob really loves working here, and I think I'd like working here too. That goes a long way. People go, oh, you know someone who works here. You have a relationship already. You're not a stranger off the street. There's at least some trust we can put that you really do want to come to work here, that you're going to show up, you're going to work hard, and you're going to be someone who's valuable in the organization. That's actually it's so useful. It's one of the 4 elements. That's how useful I think it is. So that's the video I'd recommend you go look at. It's got just tons of content in there. It's why I made the video, because people would call in the after show and ask, how do I make this happen? I've given you just a short overview of what's in there. There's so much more. Maybe that can give you some of the information you're looking for, Johnny.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to help out some people like me, or even some veterans out there.
Thanks for calling. Good best of luck.
Thank you.
It's one of those challenges because there's never one single way to do this. You can't say, I'm taking the test, and once I pass this test, I will now be qualified to get a job wherever I want to get a job. It's kind of not like getting a nursing degree and you go take your nursing boards and now you can be a nurse anywhere. It doesn't work like that in IT. It's always a different path. Everybody has a different path to get to where they're going. It's not on a rail. You don't have to go there. It's an open world. It's an open world experience. You have to find your way through the open world to make that happen. Back to the phones. Let's go to 864. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hi, Professor Messer. My name is Dakota Danielson. I'm calling from South Carolina.
Oh, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Wanted to say Happy New Year and thanks for going through all our questions and all this.
Thanks.
It's really helpful. A lot of people asking a lot of questions that I didn't think of. So I guess my question is, I'm probably making more of it than it is, but I'm wondering if there's going to be any kind of live labs where we have to say SSH into a terminal or a desktop or a virtual machine and perform any task in a specific manner for the exam, or if it's just question-based, text-based, that kind of thing.
Well, certainly the performance-based questions can be any structure they would like them to be. They could be one where they are presenting you with a wireless router and they're asking you to configure the wireless router in a certain way. Or they're presenting you with a command line and they're asking you from this command line, do this. And they're expecting you to know the commands that would be required to do that particular kind of thing. There's not really been any that go into deep detail. It's not like they ask you to log into this device. When you're logged in, configure the disk drives in this particular kind of way using DiskPart. And then when you're done with that, set up the internal firewall to do this thing. They're not quite that involved. Some of the questions aren't really about the command line as much as giving you a picture of a scenario and having you drag and drop things on that picture or pick from drop-down menus as to what you would put in certain places on that picture. So some of them aren't about things you would practically do as much as presenting a problem to you in a way that's more graphical on the screen rather than just a multiple choice based question. But some of them certainly could be, here's a Windows front end, now do this. Configure this drive. Set up this drive with RAID, change the partition size, and confirm it's working. There certainly could be a question like that. We just have no idea what they might ask. We know there's probably a certain set of questions they would, and I give you kind of a broader set of tasks to go through in my study group. Some of them are command line based. Some of them, like today, we're putting in things in a certain order. Sometimes it's a matching question. You might get some like that as well. It's not all going to be a simulation at the command line wanting a lot of detail. It's going to be a little easier than that, but it's certainly going to be a little harder than going through multiple choice based questions.
Oh, sure. Well, thank you so much. That that actually puts me a bit at ease. I've been making a mountain out of a molehill for a little while now, so
I think that'll cover you. Best of luck.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's one of those things too, and I've seen comments about this in the CompTIA subreddit where people have talked about taking the exam and they think they completely bombed the performance-based questions. They got 5 performance-based questions at the beginning, and they say, I just zoned. I have no idea what they were asking for. There's no way I got these right, and I passed the exam. Like, okay, well, that sort of is different than how we are all thinking in our brain how the performance-based questions would probably be graded. But we don't know how they're graded. We don't know how many points they're worth. It could be that a performance-based question has exactly the same number of points as a multiple choice-based question. Could be. We don't know. It could be worth twice as much. Could be worth half as much. We just don't know. We have no idea. And certainly each one is worth a different number of points. So, of course, it's going to depend on what combination of performance-based questions you get to do this. So we just aren't quite sure. And I think that's why if you're ever in a position where you're focusing too much on one particular topic or one particular style of question, you may want to take a step back and say, I'm spending a lot of time on memorizing port numbers. But if we look at the exam objectives, here, we'll go through this task right now. So here is the exam objectives. I'll bring them up on the screen, put my face in the middle of it because everybody has to see that. We'll scroll down. So section 2.0 networking is 20% of the exam. So we know a fifth of the exam is going to be networking. So let's go down to the networking section. So section 2.1 is all those port numbers. Where's section 2.2, which is hardware devices. Section 2.3, configuring a SOHO, wireless wired SOHO network. Section 2.4, wireless. Section 2.5, network services. Section 2.6, network configuration concepts. Section 2.7, internet connection types. Section 2.8, networking tools. Okay. All of that is 20% of the exam. If you got hung up and you just could not get ports and protocols, like you can't do it, it's just not clicking, you could omit that entire section. And what percentage of the exam do you think they're pulling all 20% from section 2.1? Probably not. So you're going to miss some portion of the exam, undoubtedly. You'll miss that, I think. But if you know everything else in the exam objectives, you're still going to pass. So that's what I mean by don't get wrapped around the axle. Don't worry. Should you know the port numbers? Yes, you should. I'm not telling you don't study port numbers. You should study the port numbers. But if there was just something in your brain and it wasn't clicking, and this applies to anything on the exam, if you were spending weeks on this, then you're probably doing yourself a disservice. You could have spent the week studying everything else and probably gotten more points on your exam. So there is a strategy to it. There's a common sense time management strategy to it, I think, if you want to work it that way. So if you're worried a lot about memorization, don't worry about the memorization as much as understanding what the exam is going to be asking of you everywhere else. That, I think, is probably more important as you go through this. And I think that's where you should probably focus your efforts too. I think when I look at the exam, especially exams like this, there have been exams I've taken where I'm like, well, I'm just not going to study that part. Oh, here's a topic I don't get. I'm running out of time. I have to get this done by the end of the week. Might be a need. Maybe my employer is asking for this. I have to get this done by the end of the week. I'm never going to get this topic because it's incredibly technical and I'm just not going to get it. We're going to take that one as a loss, and we're going to study up on everything else that I really know really well, and we're going to see how we do. That's a decision you have to make. That's a plus minus. There's an advantage, disadvantage to that, to go back and forth over those things. So you have to make the decision on whether that is good or not. I think you should study everything. I think you should memorize it all. I think you should get an understanding of everything that's on the exam objectives. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes the world gets into the middle of our plans and messes up everything for us. Just we have nowhere to go. We got to make a decision about what we want to do. What is going to give me the best possible outcome given these particular variables? And you've got to make the decision on what you do. That, I think, is the important part. So that's why I say figure out what makes sense for you. Because I get it. Port numbers are just painful. If you've never worked with port numbers, that's painful right there. For those of us kind of been in the industry, we've already worked with these port numbers. We've configured firewalls. We've set up port filtering. We've set up firewall D on our Linux box. We've worked with an LDAP server before. You sort of learn these things just sort of as you go through your normal work life. And some of these I've never touched before. AFP, I never really touched. SLP, a little bit. Some of these, a lot. Telnet, SSH, SMTP, DNS, HTTP. Some of these you touch all the time. So it's a balancing act. And once you sort of just learn these in your normal work life, they'll become a little bit easier to memorize. Remember, this exam recommends, if you look at it, where is it? It says, or it used to say exactly how much time it expected you to, how much experience it expected you to have on this. Must pass 2 exams. Here's what you need to know. I guess it doesn't. Maybe the A+ doesn't show that anymore in the exam objectives, or maybe I'm just memorizing it wrong. Does it have 1 year experience? 12 months. There it is. So the recommended experience, 12 months of experience as an IT support specialist. So I guess part of this is already assuming you've had time to work with some of these technologies in the field. But we all know some of us are taking this exam. We've never worked in the field. In fact, this is sort of the certification you get if you've never worked in the field. So if you have it, there's going to be a little more study for you. That's what that means, to be able to work through those. So that's really the key. That's where you should focus on and get all of those and work through the details. Let's see. Any other questions from the chat room? What about the size of hard drives? What, 15 millimeter, 12 millimeter, 7 millimeter? I have no idea what you might be referring to there for millimeter. We always mention hard drive sizes in inches. And these days, we're not even doing that, of course. We have the 3.5 inch drive and the 2.5 inch drive. These days, we're all just moving to the NvMe, the M.2 connector. It's kind of where it's all going. Unless it's something like me where I've got a NAS and I can fit either size drive in it. In fact, the chassis that goes in my NAS has connections on it. If it's a 3.5 inch drive, plug it in here in the chassis. If it's a 2.5, plug it in here. I think on the exam objectives, they even have, don't they have 1.8? Was that ever a thing? I think I might have seen 1.8 inch drive ever in my life. No, the size is 2.5 and 3.5. That's all they have on there. Did they change that? I'm wondering. I want to go back to my early, I'm going back to I have all the versions of the exam objectives on here. I'm going to go back and look at that to see if I don't have the first version. I have version 2, which was the one that came out when they first released it. Let's see if I scroll down to the hardware. Nope, just 2.5 and 3.5. So I'm just dreaming things. I want to say that's somewhere else. Somebody want to spot me on that one? Maybe it's just the previous version. Maybe it's the 900 series I'm thinking about. They all blend together after a while. They're all the same thing after a while. So that's probably what I remember, is that earlier version of this. Yes, I do remember when the big drives, the big platters that you would pick up, those 20 megabyte platters of drives that you would have on a mainframe. For those, I could have sworn 1.8 is there. I have to do a find. Now we're all remembering it. Is this a Berenstein Bear thing? It's in section 1.1 with mobile devices. That's why. It's not in the hardware. It's 1.8 versus 2.5 inch. I don't think 1.8 was ever a thing. I don't think that ever was a thing. So maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what we remember. And it's still, of course, in the latest version, isn't it? Let's look at the latest version in 1.1. Yep, it's still in there. See, I'm not dreaming. They never really used 1.8 drives. I think everything was always flash drives in those phones. Was there ever 1.8? Anyway, I had a very difficult time finding it right off the bat as I was putting together these courses and finding out that was the case. So maybe I'm not dreaming. Maybe we're fine with that. That's where it was, to have all of those there. Well, can you believe we made it through another hour of Q&A? We did over an hour and 10 minutes in that first hour. And of course, we followed it up with an hour of our Q&A here. We could not do this live stream without you. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for participating. Thank you for our questions in the chat room, in the after show. It's kind of what makes it fun, after all. We do another one of these in 2 days for the Core 2 exam. So if you go back to the Core 2 exam, we're going to go through all those exam objectives. I've already written the questions out. I've already forgotten what they are. So it'll be new for all of us on Thursday. Come back in a couple days. That time will be at noon. Well, just like it always is. This was the only time we changed the timing for the start time to be an hour later. So that is absolutely where you should go with this on Thursday, is the noon start time. If you show up at 1, you're going to miss all the great Q&A at the beginning. So show up at noon. You can always find out when the next event is going to be and the time zone by going to professormesser.com/calendar. I even have a list there where you're able to go to and look at the time zones for what you're doing. It's a great place to go for this. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group.